Genesis chapter 5 gives us a genealogy tracing Adam to Noah through Seth's lineage. The record states that Adam and Eve had daughters. These unnamed daughters would then have been their brothers' wives. Well, you had to start somewhere. It worked with far fewer, if any, defective genes back then. I certainly don't recommend copying that now. Another difference with the world back then was just how long everyone lived. Clearly, there was something different about the atmospheric conditions. The first 7 chapters of Genesis cover 3 different worlds. The first world was the perfect one that God created. It centered around the Garden of Eden. The relationship between God and man was perfect. The second world was the modification by Satan when he convinced Adam and Eve to eat the fruit. There was a death of a relationship that day. Adam and Eve learned to feel shame and hide from God. Then there was a physical death. Animals died so that Adam and Eve could have better clothing. Yet the world's atmosphere was such that people could live long and engage in strange, godless things. This story will reveal what some of those strange things were, then tell the story of a catastrophe that rebooted the world. This catastrophe served the same purpose as a hard reboot on a computer, but even more so, because after the reboot, the world was never the same. This reboot ultimately gave us the third world, the one we live in even today. Chapter 6 tells us that the sons of God married the daughters of men. This union was not good, although the reason why is not immediately apparent. Some, including me, have speculated that the Nephilim mentioned in verse 4 were the problem. However, the Nephilim were simply giants who reappeared after the flood. God's people encountered them again in Canaan. David Guzik has done some good work on this. According to him, the sons of God refer to demons or demon-possessed men. I agree with his conclusions on that matter. You can read what he has to say by following the link in the description. Guzik's theory would explain why the earth became so wicked that the same merciful God who spared Cain the murderer's life decided to wash it and kill almost everyone on it in the process. Chapter 6 portrays a God who is looking over the whole earth and into the hearts of all mankind. Even with that vantage point, he only finds one family that wants to obey him. Noah was a patriarch, married, with 3 sons and 3 daughters-in-law, and willing to listen to God's voice amid a world filled with Nephilim. So God offered him a covenant. It is the first time God introduces a covenant in the Bible. It is worthwhile to reflect on what a covenant is, because it will come up again. A covenant is different from a contract. A contract is transactional, but a covenant is relational. A contract is a legally binding agreement between 2 or more parties. There are legal checks and balances to ensure both parties comply. A home mortgage would be a good example of a contract. A covenant is far deeper than a contract because it is not transactional. It is relational. It really is not designed to be broken by anything other than death. A marriage is a good example of a covenant. The newlyweds will say, "I promise to love you, care for you, and cherish you until death do us part." Unfortunately, many people treat their marriages like a contract, which is why divorce and remarriage rates are so high. God does not operate on a contractual basis with his people. He operates on covenants. He does not break his covenants, but he must contend with us humans, and we do break covenants. God gave Noah specific instructions for building a boat. The boat needed to be big enough to hold each kind of animal. Before you say that it is impossible, keep in mind that all he needed to carry were some of each type, and in most cases, only 2. For example, Noah would have only required 2 dog-like creatures and 2 cat-like creatures. All the different breeds came later. The reason for the boat? There was going to be rain. God had had enough. Whatever awful thing was happening with the sons of God and women had so thoroughly corrupted the earth that God decided to do a total factory reset. The covenant God established with Noah was that if he obeyed God's instructions, he and all other life in that boat would survive. That raises some troubling questions. Why did God allow it to become this way? Why did God create an environment where the earth could be like this? I don't know. I don't understand God. However, I will say this. God is far more committed to the free will of mankind than I could ever be. Even in perfect Eden, he allowed for a sin opportunity to exist in the form of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That same God let men run the earth down until he finally intervened. Yet his intervention was slow and obvious. No one could say that God did not warn them. For years, Noah carried out his ark project in front of everyone. Can you imagine the news headlines? Crazy old man builds big boat for no apparent reason. In Matthew 24:38, Jesus tells us that the rest of the people were oblivious to the impending disaster. How could that be? It must be that they were too far gone to care. It was easier to be right in their own eyes and see Noah as the lunatic. It is always this way. The signs of God are available for all who are willing to see or willing to hear. Even in Jesus' day, some recognized him as the Messiah, but most did not. Genesis 7 describes this disaster. Every person or creature that was not in the ark died. So it leaves us with a question. Is God good? If I were as powerful as God, I would have eliminated the debauchery before it got this bad. I would have surgically removed the evil and prevented it from getting to this point. I would have, and on it goes. I, a man created by God with a sense of justice which comes from God, would seek to judge God's actions. I would say he should have done things differently. God's creation seeks to judge him. A quick perusal of Reddit and Medium will reveal plenty of instances where people go down that line of reasoning. If a person wants to condemn God, he can do so. God does not stop him. Stories like the one in Genesis 7 are very convenient for people who want to condemn God. For those who believe that God is good, there are countless stories of God's deliverance and mercy. The other stories, including how he spared Adam and Eve and even Cain, the first murderer, all provide context for this one. They make me wonder if God, who is so much more long-suffering than I am, decided to do this now. How bad must conditions have been, and who am I to think that there could have been a better way? Another objection is that the ark was not big enough to hold everyone. Consider that in chapter 6, God searched the earth, identified all the people who were righteous, and gave specific instructions for a boat big enough. Had there been more virtuous people, there would have been a larger boat, or multiple boats. I believe the oblivion referred to in Matthew 24:38 speaks of dark hearts that would not hear God. If God reached Noah, it is reasonable to believe he was willing to reach others as well. There are times when God chooses to do things that we don't like, or doesn't do things we wish he would. During those times, it helps to remember where our sense of justice ultimately came from. If we do that, then we must trust God, because we cannot judge better than our Creator. We wrap this up where we started, believing in a merciful God who searched the whole earth for those willing to covenant with him and agree with him. We have also seen our first off-ramp for those who don't like this God. Some believe that they know better than God, and God will allow them to test that theory. This post will be the last in this series for the time being. We have covered the three worlds God has created. Genesis will go on to introduce us to God's people, the fathers of his nation. I want to cover God's dealings with his people, but I will do that differently. I want to look at who God's people are today and what he expects from them. I will approach that from a gospel-centered lens, and in the process of doing that, we will be back in Genesis.